This winter, inspired by cool bookish tournament projects by colleagues like Melissa Alter-Smith over at Teach Living Poets and Jared Amato of Project Lit, I decided to launch my own English teachery tournament. I wanted to know, out of the hundreds of amazing books out there, which were working the best in the classroom for the teachers in our community. After polling over 2,000 teachers over in Creative High School English for their favorites in the 9th and 10th grade zone, I landed on 16 great titles for the tournament, and we've been voting ever since. Today on the pod, I want to share the top titles and some of the comments and rationales teachers have shared along with their votes along the way. If you're looking for a new book for your curriculum, or you're curious what other teachers are focusing on in theirs, today's show is for you. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. First things first, let's talk about how things began with this tournament. I made a post in Creative High School English where I don't even know what it is now, maybe 30,000 wonderful creative teachers around the world get together to chat and share ideas. And in that post, I said, hey, look, I'm trying to come up with some of the very best, most popular, most wonderful books to teach in the classroom. Please vote. And then I put in a bunch of book titles, but I also invited teachers to add as many as they wanted. And we ended up with almost 100 suggested titles and so many votes. So I went through, which was a big project, and sort of categorized all these different books and the votes they got, and I picked out 16 of the very most popular books from the post and sorted them out into a bracket. Now, I didn't want to be totally random with my bracket because, as you know, in a tournament, if you put all the very top candidates together at the very beginning, you're going to knock out the strongest candidates early by other candidates. So I know this from my own years as a tennis player. You want to spread out the leaders. So Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, Night by Eli Wiesel, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare were the four that stood out of these 100 with the most initial votes. But I knew that wouldn't necessarily mean that they were going to be the top four in the tournament because, people look at 100 different texts. They're just going to kind of vote a bit willy-nilly, like they're going to probably catch a lot of their favorites, but they might miss some, etc. So I didn't want to say like, okay, the one that got the most votes in this initial poll is the very best book to teach in the classroom, but I did want to kind of weigh the ones that got a lot of votes at the top. So Long Way Down and Romeo and Juliet really, they pulled away. They were very popular candidates. So I put one up in the top corner of the tournament and one way down in the bottom corner. So there was no way they could face each other until the finals. And then Night and Fahrenheit 451, I put in the opposite corners. And then I just kind of went through and spread the rest of the books out in the other 14 positions. So we started off with really a lovely field. If I'm going to put my own opinion on it, I felt like it was a really nice mix of contemporary and canonical books. I felt like it was pretty diverse in its representation. So there were a lot of different viewpoints at the table. I would never try to say that it was perfect or that it told every story or represented, every background of author, but it was pretty good. So the top 16 books, the books that went into the tournament were The Book Thief, Long Way Down, Firekeeper's Daughter, Dear Martin, The House on Mango Street, The Poet X, Trevor Noah Born a Crime, Lord of the Flies, Speak, Macbeth, Night, Animal Farm, Romeo and Juliet, The Odyssey, Fahrenheit 451, and Of Mice and Men. And I imagine you'll agree with me in saying, nice, right? That's a nice grouping of books. So I started out with a first round of voting, the round of 16, and there were a lot of close matchups, but there were also some blowouts. So Long Way Down went up against The Book Thief, and Long Way Down won. Animal Farm went up against Romeo and Juliet, and Romeo and Juliet won. Night went up against Macbeth, and Night won. Fahrenheit 451 went up against Of Mice and Men, and Fahrenheit 451 won. The Odyssey played Lord of the Flies, and Lord of the Flies won. Speak played The House on Mango Street, and The House on Mango Street won. Dear Martin played Born a Crime, and Born a Crime won. And The Firekeeper's Daughter went up against The Poet X, and The Poet X won. So in this round, there wasn't anything like super noteworthy. As I recall, like they weren't like super close matchups. Maybe the thing that stuck with me the most was that Long Way Down seemed to be positioning itself for the win. Like it absolutely blew out The Book Thief, even though The Book Thief is a wonderful book too. I think it actually swept the votes in the vote on Facebook. I also, for a lot of these, did votes on Instagram stories, but usually only when it was close on Facebook. So I felt like we needed more votes to decide which one was truly the best. And right away, I was hearing things like this from teachers. That they pair Long Way Down with slam poetry, and that their students love it, and that the story is so engaging, and that Jason Reynolds' audio is so cool, that students want to read the book, and that since they're engaged, like it's just easier. Everything is easier. Teachers love that it's short because they can fit it in with other stuff. They love that it's accessible, insightful. One teacher said, it's accessible, insightful, thought-provoking, and full of beautiful language. I use it in the middle of my poetry unit, and it hits every time. Teachers said they were right in the middle of Long Way Down. Students were already loving it. Teachers said it offers a different perspective, that it's really unique, that it made a great pairing with Macbeth. Just like teachers really took the time in this vote to say why they love Long Way Down, which was just not always true in the tournament in general. A lot of times people would just put a one-word answer and say like, oh, I vote for Speak, and that's it. They would just type Speak. Everybody's busy. That's understandable. But Long Way Down seemed to get a lot more commentary. And so right away I was thinking very confidently, I think we have our winner. Long Way Down is just going to coast through. Okay, so then came the quarterfinals. And in this round, Long Way Down continued to dominate in its part of the bracket. It swept through Lord of the Flies 18-1 on Facebook, although it was a little closer in my vote on Instagram stories. It won 183-72 there. Night defeated House on Mango Street again pretty handily, 14-3 on Facebook, 160-82 on Instagram stories. The closest ones in this next round were Born a Crime versus Fahrenheit 451. That one was really close. There was actually a tie in the voting on Facebook, and I broke it with Instagram stories, and it went to Trevor Noah 193-142. So Born a Crime just barely taking out Ray Bradbury, which is, of course, Fahrenheit 451 is such a popular book to teach, and I feel like all the more so right now. But people were really saying, great respect for Born a Crime. And then again, maybe in the biggest surprise of this round, the Poet X nudged out Romeo and Juliet in a super close race. So Romeo and Juliet won on Facebook, but then on Instagram stories, the Poet X won by just enough more to pull it out. So that was dramatic. Romeo and Juliet had been such a favorite going into the tournament, but it fell in the second round to the Poet X. We saw contemporary Elizabeth Acevedo take out Shakespeare. And of course, the other Shakespeare in the tournament, Macbeth, had already gone out to Night in the first round. So now all the Shakespeare was out, and what we had left were the top most popular books. So we had Long Way Down, Night, Born a Crime, and The Poet X. So now we're going into the semifinals with just 4 books. And to be honest, I feel like I could seal the story off here. We don't necessarily need just one book to tell everybody that it's like the most wonderful, popular book and everyone should teach it, right? Because there's so many different situations you could be in. It could pair differently with your other books. It could fill holes. And so really just knowing that teachers love teaching these 4 books, Night, Long Way Down, The Poet X, and Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. I'm hoping that those titles maybe like give you something to think about if you have a hole or you're building a new course. Maybe you want to consider one of those books for your 9th and 10th graders because they are getting such positive feedback from teachers. But, a tournament is a tournament. And I did feel like I should keep going and finish and see what would happen in the end. I was still feeling very confident that Long Way Down was going to win based on all the feedback, based on all the comments in the tournament, and how it was just like blowing out its opponents. So a lot of people did start to talk at this point in the tournament about how painful it was to vote, and I started to feel guilty about even asking people to vote because I didn't want to say that one story was better than another story, but I was trying to share back. I wanted to create something to share back. Like, people are really moved by this book. Students are really engaged with this book right now. And so again, I do not at all want to say you should only teach the book that won, but I do want to let you know what happened as the tournament went forward. So this semifinal round was where I got really surprised. I was sure Long Way Down was going to win, but really in droves and with long comments to defend their choices, teachers stood up for the importance of Night in the curriculum in this moment. And so I honestly was just shocked that Night won dramatically on Facebook with a 62-22 victory. On Instagram stories, it was a little bit closer. It was 292 votes to 266 votes. And again, that was probably the most voting I ever saw over the course of the tournament. People were just really passionate about these 2 books. And a lot of people did talk about the fact that they taught both or that they loved them both and they were both so important and they were both so powerful, or like, all these different reasons, or they like refused to vote because it was so difficult. So again, they're both wonderful books that I just want to say, consider them for the classroom. On the other side, for the Poet X versus Born a Crime, it was very close. There was an initial tie on Facebook. So I did an Instagram post. There was almost a tie on the Instagram post. There was like a 1 vote margin there. So we had a tie in one community, a 1 vote margin on the Instagram post. So then I took it to Instagram stories, and Born a Crime won by a bit on Instagram stories. So Born a Crime in the end was our victor on the other side. So it came down to Night and Born a Crime for the finals. But I want to pause here for a second and just sort of pause on why teachers felt so passionate about these 2 books, Night and Long Way Down, because there was so much commentary and just so many helpful comments from teachers. So let me read you a few things that teachers said. Night is a book that every American should read. It needs to be part of the common understanding and the common discourse, wrote one teacher. It turns a story of many them into a story of one me, and truthfully, in the American culture of extreme individualism and focus on self first, that is quickly becoming the only way to engender true empathy. Long Way Down is a great book, engaging, moving, and relatable, but it's about Americans in America. Then we had a teacher write, Night should be read by every human on the planet at least 3 times at different ages. Somebody else wrote, I've taught them both. Both can be great, but given today's circumstances, I think the most important book I teach is Night. Another teacher wrote, Night, we are sadly losing our survivors due to time. The history of the Holocaust is being forgotten or misconstrued despite our best efforts. The empathy and understanding gained from this book are needed in our society. And Elie Wiesel is such a testament to strength and advocacy. This entire text helps bring the Holocaust back to one and helps readers see the people in the Holocaust, not just the statistics. I do love Long Way Down too. Another teacher wrote, I really like Long Way Down, but Night always leads to so much learning. I used resources from Facing History in Ourselves in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and students gained such an appreciation for the history and Elie Wiesel's legacy. Another teacher wrote, Night. I agree that it's a book everyone should read. Quite often, it's the book that really opens students' eyes to that part of history. Long Way Down is good, but so many kids are going to pick it up anyway. Night, on the other hand, wouldn't be. And then finally, I wanted to share this quotation. Teacher mom, Night. Sophomore son, Long Way Down. I love that. And then again, so many wonderful comments for why people might want to teach Long Way Down. Here are some things that teachers said in this conversation. Long Way Down. Both are important works, but Long Way Down will hook reluctant readers in a way that Night won't. Everyone should read Night, but some students might not be ready to handle it yet in the first half of high school. It's important information to know, but it's incredibly difficult to process that reality. So thankful I get to teach both in my 9th grade curriculum. If I had to choose, wrote another teacher, it would be Long Way Down. The level of engagement it brings to students of all levels is top notch. Students start the unit by saying they hate poetry, and they end the unit with their new favorite book. Another teacher wrote, Long Way Down is a gripping book that pulls on emotions, which is relevant to teens. Even if students have not gone through what the character is facing, a sympathy can be felt for someone who has a tough decision to face. Jason Reynolds is an amazing YA author who really knows how to connect with students. The moral dilemmas faced in this book can be used as a learning tool, which can teach lessons that extend far beyond the classroom. Long Way Down was able to captivate students in a way that caused many reluctant readers to be on the edge of their seats anticipating reading the next section. Both are important texts, but my vote goes to Mr. Reynolds and his contemporary work. And then finally, another teacher wrote, I taught Long Way Down for the first time last year with 9th grade reluctant readers. I will teach this every year as far as I'm concerned. Such a good book, and the kids loved it. So, honestly, I kind of ended up wishing that I had had Night and Long Way Down on opposite sides of the bracket. There was like a false initial thought that Romeo and Juliet would be the second most powerful contender, or like the sort of parallel powerful contender to Long Way Down. But it was actually Night, which didn't get nearly as many votes in the initial poll. That stood up when people really started thinking about it and reflecting on their experience and looking at the matchups. They just really overwhelmingly stood up for both of these two books. So then finally there was the finals, and we had Trevor Noah's Born a Crime and Elie Wiesel's Night. And they weren't quite as close in this one. I think, I don't want to downplay at all the popularity and wonderfulness of Born a Crime and, the other books in the quarterfinals, because I think teachers are having a lot of success with it, and it's really popular, and it made it to the finals, which is awesome. It just didn't seem to bring about quite as much conversation and support as Long Way Down. So I maybe, even though Born a Crime and Night were the ones that ended up in the finals, if I look in like a more holistic way at the commentary and the passion that came through in the votes, I would think maybe the top two in that regard would be Long Way Down and Night. But in the end, Night defeated Born a Crime 47-14 on Facebook. It was a little bit closer on Instagram stories, but Night won there too. And so the top most popular book, according to our community and everybody who participated in this like month-long voting project across all my social media, was Night. Top 4 were Long Way Down, Night, Born a Crime, The Poet X. Top 8, Long Way Down, Lord of the Flies, House on Mango Street, Night, Fahrenheit 451, Born a Crime, The Poet X, Romeo and Juliet. Anywho, so my takeaways from the tournament, it was so interesting. It was really fascinating for me. I'll be back with a podcast about the 11th and 12th grade bracket, which caused me to do quite a bit more soul searching and like thinking about what drives us as we choose texts. But this one was mainly just a joy to participate in all the conversation and see all the ways that teachers were engaging students with these books and like why they're working so well in the classrooms right now. And I really feel excited to share this set of book lists, like from the top 16 to the top 8 to the top 4 to the top 2 to the top 1. Like these are some pretty great books. And my goal in the end really wasn't to prioritize any one story over another and say that like only that story is worth teaching, but I just wanted to learn more about what's working right now, what's engaging, what students are responding to, what feels relevant to students right now. And, it turns out a mix of canonical and contemporary, a diverse group of authors. That's really lovely to see. And if you don't teach any of the books that made it into the top 4, I hope that this might be an interesting time to pick one up and look at it, or to scan some reviews of all 4 and think like which of these might be a worthy add to my classroom. But of course, maybe none of those are the right fit for your classroom. These 16, 8, 4, 2, and top 1 books aren't necessarily the answer for every classroom. But I do think it's very interesting just to see this as like a project and to see the information that's coming from other classrooms. So I hope it will be helpful for you. I hope it will be an asset. That was my goal, that when you go searching for new texts worth exploring, you might find some starting points here. So thanks for listening. Well, it's not March Madness anymore. It's April, but we just had our own sort of March Madness podcast, and I'm glad you joined me. Thanks for being here. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.